Right, so for as long as Israel continue to strike Iran, so Iran will return fire on Israel. And they very much are. It being widely speculated that Iran have barely scratched the surface of their arsenal at this point in time. Israel's justification is allegedly nuclear weapons that Iran are developing. A complete nonsense, since they are still, for the time being at least, signatories to the nuclear non-proliferation agreement, making a nonsense of all such claims. But then, given what Israel have been targeting, far beyond nuclear facilities, decimating residential areas, 90% of those who have been harmed by Israeli atrocity being women and children, it is standard Israeli strategy, after all, punching down on the most vulnerable. Where Israel is seen to have big Western backers, some of them have opened their mouths rather foolishly to be given short shrift, shall we say, whilst Iran has its supporters too, not least the Houthis of Yemen, acting in concert with them. But if the likes of the US or UK, led by Zionist shills as they are, and other nations come to Israel's aid, Keir Starmer having allegedly signalled his assent to do so already, will other Muslim nations side with Iran too? Well, Iran have put a call out about that as it happens. Right, so the third day of fierce conflict between Iran and Israel has shattered any illusions of containment or of this conflict ending anytime soon, in a war rapidly spiralling beyond its initial provocations. Triggered by Israel's unprovoked attack on Iranian nuclear facilities and the assassination of scientists and key military personnel, Israel have only continued in this vein. The assassination including Brigadier General Mohammad Kazmi, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Intelligence Organization, IRGC Intelligence. For as much as some in Iran are saying Iran will stop when Israel does, the IRGC are now talking up not stopping until Netanyahu's regime is finished. So it's very hard to see either side right now not responding with increasingly escalating force. But this is not a war of aggression from Tehran. As Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has made clear overnight, this is self-defense. An excerpt from the Cradle on this reading, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on 15th of June that Iran will not end its strikes against Israel until the US-backed Israeli war against the country is halted. We are defending ourselves. Our defence is entirely legitimate, the Foreign Minister said. This defence is our response to aggression. If the aggression stops, naturally, our responses will also stop, he added. Araghchi condemned the Israeli attack on Iran's offshore South Pars gas field on Saturday night, warning that dragging the conflict to the Persian Gulf is a strategic mistake, and its aim is to drag the war beyond Iranian territory. Israel's attack would never have happened without the green light and support, he affirmed, stressing that Iran does not believe US statements claiming Washington is not involved in the Israeli war. It is necessary for the US to condemn Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities if they want to prove their goodwill. Araghchi also said Iran has hard evidence that American forces have been supporting the Israeli regime. Israel's initial strikes on Iran definitely were not acts of defence, but calculated provocations aimed at the nuclear facilities in Natanz and Fordo, along with the targeted assassinations of senior Iranian scientists and commanders. According to reports, these attacks were not spontaneous either. Certainly Abbas Araghchi's comments have reinforced this, that they were green-lit by the citrus-skinned sociopath passing for US President Donald Trump. Despite Trump's current denials, though, it has now been publicly confirmed that the US coordination, US weapons, such as Hellfire missiles sent to Israel, specifically to target Iran, it is alleged, are actively being used by Israel in their latest strikes. Therefore, this makes the US not anything of the sort, a passive bystander, but a complicit actor. Iran is armed with what it claims is solid evidence of direct US involvement. It's treating the ongoing Israeli assaults as part of a broader US-backed strategy. Iranian officials are therefore no longer distinguishing between Tel Aviv and Washington in their strategic calculus either. In a searing rebuke to those still seeking to help propagate the nonsense that Israel are coming out with, despite launching these attacks on Iran, are actually the victims, of course, because when aren't they? Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also set out Iran's actions as purely defensive and that they will defend themselves for as long as it takes, for as long as Israel strike them on a baseless basis. He condemned not only the initial strikes but also Israel's brazen bombing overnight of that South Pars gas field, a critical piece of both Iran's domestic energy infrastructure and the global natural gas market, the largest natural gas field on the planet as it is. Disruption here does not just impact Iran, it has far-reaching implications for global energy stability, especially as European markets still struggle with the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the ongoing energy volatility that's associated with that. Iran's latest retaliatory strike, the ongoing True Promise 3, has significantly shifted the balance of power against Israel, though, who are, well, really not used to it, are they? Hundreds of advanced missiles were fired at Israeli military and infrastructure targets once again, with Iran claiming a death toll of at least 10 in Israel overnight. These weren't symbolic strikes, they were tactical, precise operations targeting Israel's oil refineries, energy plants and intelligence centres. One of the most notable targets last night was Israel's largest oil refinery in Haifa, which was partially shut down after sustaining critical damage. It was a major blow to Israel, as this excerpt explains. The company in charge of the Bayzan complex, a refinery located near the Haifa port in the north of Israeli-occupied territories, said on Sunday that overnight attacks by Iran had damaged pipelines and transmission lines between facilities inside the complex. Some of the downstream facilities in the complex have been shut down, said the company in a note to investors. The Bayzan complex is responsible for a significant part of the fuel demand in the Israeli-occupied territories. It has a refining capacity of nearly 0.2 million barrels per day. Experts say Iran's attack on the refinery would severely disrupt Israel's fuel supply chains, as the regime relies on imported oil for nearly 40% of its energy needs. These attacks have demonstrated not only improved Iranian targeting capabilities, but also the severe vulnerabilities and selective targeting of Israeli assets by Iran, both military and economic, not to mention Israel's much-touted air defense systems, which Iran's attacks have rendered virtually irrelevant, and there's a reason for that, it seems, as well. Iran's use of ballistic missiles of various types, both new and old, have, as we've seen, overwhelmed the Iron Dome and David Sling defense arrays. Reports have come in that suggest that Iranian engineers have deployed a new method of interference that's enabled them to do that has caused Israeli missile interceptors to target each other. That because Israel used several air defense systems, Iran have managed to turn each system against the others, which, if true, will be a stunning example of electronic warfare and strategic sabotage that makes a complete mockery of Israel's complex air defences, and perhaps they're actually too complex. Despite Iran's stated intent to avoid civilian areas, the nature of warfare, especially when it involves strikes on infrastructure that has been embedded intentionally in populated zones, made civilian casualties inevitable. At least 10 fatalities, as I mentioned a moment ago, have been recorded in Israel due to Iran's latest strikes, and hospitals in Tel Aviv and Haifa report dozens more wounded. Arguably, this is the unfortunate result of Israeli decisions to integrate military operations within civilian zones, using their own people as human shields, and again it comes back to Israel having started this for no more reason than to keep Netanyahu in power as well. But they're always the victims, of course, aren't they? This fact is reinforced by reports that Israeli authorities are preventing their own citizens from leaving the country as well. It's a cynical tactic of using civilians as de facto human shields, and it only deepens the moral depravity of Israeli leadership as a result. As Iran's armed forces issued a warning, "Leave the occupied lands to save your lives," it became clearer than ever that the Israeli government is endangering its own people by pursuing a war it cannot control, not to mention is actively preventing its citizens from leaving should they wish to. The third day of strikes also saw a massive outpouring of support from Iran's regional allies. The Yemeni Houthis saluted Iran's response and announced their own operations, claiming to have launched hypersonic missiles once more at sensitive Israeli sites. Meanwhile, the group Kataib Hezbollah, which is an Iraqi armed faction aligned with Iran and the Iraqi splinter group of the Lebanese Hezbollah group, has declared it will strike US bases in the region if Washington enters the war directly. America has at least a couple of air bases in Iraq. These are also not hollow threats. Kataib Hezbollah actually has a long history of targeting US forces in Iraq. And if allegations that the US is already involved, as Abbas Araghchi has implied, they may move on that threat for much longer, therefore. Iran's also called on the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, to take a stand against the Netanyahu regime. So a dangerous precedent is forming that this is no longer an isolated tit-for-tat. It may soon spread to a potential regional war with more nations getting involved. And the likely catalyst for that will be fools like Keir Starmer, involving nations like the UK, that this matter has nothing to do with and aren't in their nation's interest whatsoever, because they themselves are so sold out to Israel, they'll act anyway, adding to the complicity they are already in sore need of being held accountable for. As if military retaliation was not enough, though, Iranian intelligence have also announced the capture of 2 operatives from Mossad in northwestern Iran. This foiled espionage attempt underscores the covert war simmering beneath the surface. The operatives were allegedly involved in sabotage operations aimed at weakening Iran's Iran's retaliation efforts from within. Their capture not only neutralizes a short-term threat, but also potentially offers Iran valuable intelligence on future Israeli plans too. Iran has also brought down 44 Israeli drones over its territory in the last 48 hours as well, showing Iran's retaliation for Israel's unprovoked attack, the competence of their air defences, and that the attack by Israel is nothing less than a full-spectrum warfare campaign that has been shown to span air, land, cyber and covert operations, all giving further weight to Iran's insistence that it is acting in self-defence as it comes under concerted attack by Israel on multiple fronts. Some global reactions to Iran's self-defence have been as hypocritical as they are impotent, and in fact, in one part, quite hilarious too. For instance, German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful's condemnation of Iran for defending itself and claimed it was in violation of the NPT over its nuclear program was met with, well, scorn, shall we put it, from Iran's foreign ministry via their spokesperson Esmail Bakai, who wrote on Twitter, "History reminder. Germany ignited 2 world wars. Iran sheltered Jews fleeing Hitler, asked Polish/French refugees who got Iranian passports. Those perpetually on the wrong side of history best stay silent now." Well, he's not wrong. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron's alarmism over Iran's supposed nuclear threat now has also been ridiculed as a desperate distraction tactic. These reactions are not just diplomatic spats, they reveal the sheer duplicity of Western states that continue to arm Israel while condemning Iran for defending itself. Well, how dare they defend themselves? Only Israel has that right, don't they? Going against the international rules-based order they supposedly represent and insulting the intelligence of all of us as they race to Israel's defence at every turn, no matter what the rogue state does. The silence of the so-called liberal democracies is even more deafening when set against Iran's efforts to involve international organisations and call for multilateral restraint, whilst making clear it has a right to self-defence and that they are exercising that right. Despite the horror of 3 days of open warfare, unlikely to end soon at that, Iranian officials remain resolute. Former IRGC chief commanders have claimed that the war against the Zionist regime is progressing with prudence and management, emphasising that Iran is acting with restraint even as it suffers continued attacks by Israel. The broader message from Tehran is that if Israel ceases its hostilities, Iran will too. But as long as Israeli aggression continues, fuelled by the US, arms, foreign silence, nationalist zeal, Tehran will not back down from defending Iran and its people from an out-of-control genocidal regime and the maniac who leads it. Iran's message has been consistent. This is about survival, sovereignty and dignity. If Israel and its allies truly want peace, they must stop the violence. Not merely in Iran, but in Gaza as well, and the West Bank too, where their crimes against humanity continue without reprieve. But who believes Israel has ever wanted that? 77 years of their history is full of examples to prove that point, but there's scant evidence to the contrary. This war must end, but it can only end with justice, accountability and the moral courage to call aggression by its name, no matter who commits it. Which means exceptionalism for Israel has to end, no ifs or buts. For more on how Israel's atrocities are growing to become an ever bigger nightmare for Benjamin Netanyahu, though, get all the details of those events once more being dropped in his lap by Iran, and this video recommendation here is your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and help to support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.